Honestly, Cenk, the openness in which they're referring to the source of funding makes me wonder, were they just incredibly negligent and like just not careful at all with the crime that they were committing? Or did they not realize that this was illegal? Now, again, the founders of Tenet have not been indicted. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because the DOJ is working on those indictments or if these two individuals are cooperating with the DOJ as part of this investigation. I have no idea. But the way they just openly say to each other in written form, we're getting the money from the Russians is just weird to me. Okay, but it is what it is.
No, look, Anna, my two thoughts on that are, one is, yesterday we were getting it from ExxonMobil, and earlier we were getting it from JP Morgan Chase, and today we're getting it from Russia. So maybe it's Tuesday to them, right? And the other thing is, if you ever say the word Russia, you know what's gonna happen with the right wing. It's a hoax, Russia, Russia, Russia. Russia's the most innocent country in the world. And you're gonna get like nuclear blast of right-wing lunacy anytime the word Russia is mentioned.
A scandal is rocking the world of right-wing media, with several prominent online right-wing commentators and pundits, including Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, and Benny Johnson, being accused by the Department of Justice of taking money from the Russians to do disinformation. Cenk Uygur and Ana Kasparian of the Young Turks broke all this down. It's a really interesting story. I'll add in my thoughts here and there. Let's check this out.
We have some updates on the Justice Department indictments of two Russian nationals who work for RT and how a Tennessee-based media company called Tenet essentially used prominent right-wing content creators here in the United States to unwittingly spread pro-Russian propaganda. But one person didn't do so unwittingly, and that was the co-founder of Tenet, Lauren Chen. The other co-founder is actually her husband. So the indictment didn't list their names, and I want to be clear that Lauren Chen and her husband have not been indicted. There is a possibility they could be in the future, depending on how this case plays out. But the indictment does clearly note multiple times that Lauren Chen and her husband seemed to know that the money was coming from Russia, and they went to some lengths to basically conceal that fact from the content creators, even fabricating a person out of whole cloth. So let's get into those details. Actually, before we do, Cenk, we covered this story yesterday when you were out, and I'm sure you have a lot to say about the story in general. So I'm gonna give you an opening to just tell me what you think so far.
Yeah, look, we've had beefs with some of those guys, and at different times we've gotten along with some of those guys. So on a personal level, I wish this story didn't exist and that they had never done this. But I got to be honest with you guys. So they're getting paid $100,000 a video. Okay, now if we were paid $100,000 per video, we'd never have to ask you for another dime again. Okay, because that's not the economics of digital media. So some of the videos would get 8,000 views. That's like $50, man. So then they ask, okay, who's giving the money? And they claim, oh, it is just a wealthy businessman, and they make up a name. You didn't Google the guys, because if you Googled, you'd know that he doesn't exist. So you never even bothered to ask. They're getting $400,000 a month for just 4 videos. If you do that over the course of a year, that's $4.8 million. And you didn't bother asking who was giving you that money. You didn't bother Googling. And all the videos happen to be pro-Russia and against Ukraine. Wow, what a coincidence. So this whole thing of like, we were victimized too. I'm sorry, but I mean, I'm not saying that they're criminally responsible or anything like that. But don't tell me that you had no idea what was going on. And golly gee, no, sorry, but I don't believe you at all.
So look, the content creators, Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, Dave Rubin, there were others, but those are some of the more prominent names. According to the indictment, didn't know where the source of the money was coming from, and that they were lied to by Tenet Media, and a lot of the details of what was going on was intentionally concealed. But Cenk, the most shocking part about this whole indictment is that one of them actually did ask questions. And it was the person I least expected, Dave Rubin. Okay, so Dave Rubin wanted to know more about like this wealthy businessman who's like funding the whole operation. And not only did they make up a name, they made up a resume. Okay, they like
and Ana Kasparian and Cenk Uygur know Dave Rubin very well because he worked at the Young Turks, and they were actually friends, I think, for a time before he made this heel turn over to the right wing. But like Cenk Uygur is saying here, did they really not know, or did they just not want to know? Were they willfully ignorant? Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, Dave Rubin, these other people. Was it, you would think if somebody's going to give you $100,000 for a video that, like Cenk Uygur is saying, would have made like $50 in ad revenue, some of these that only got less than 10,000 views, you're not going to ask some questions as to why they're paying you $100,000. It just doesn't add up.
Literally made up a resume. And in the resume, apparently the thing that alerted Dave Rubin to potential red flags was that I guess social justice was mentioned in the resume. And he's like, social justice, I don't know about that. But there is no other indication, at least according to this indictment, that the content creators knew for sure what was going on. So who knows, the story could develop from here, but that's what we know so far.
But I want to be clear. I'm not saying that they definitely knew and somebody told them, hey, it's the Russians and they took the money anyway. What I'm saying is when someone says, I'm going to give you a preposterous amount of money for this video, and then they give you a fake name and you don't bother Googling it, and then they tell you to say ridiculous things in favor of Russia. And I mean, another part of the story that's amazing is, they say one of the producers goes, well, this seems like overt shilling. It's in the indictment. And they go, shut up and say it. And they go, okay, so yes, sir, of course, sir. Please. So you're telling me you had no idea that the massively pro-Russian, anti-Ukrainian videos you were getting paid $100,000 a video to do, like you didn't, at a bare minimum, you didn't look into it at all because you didn't want to know.
So we're going to show you the very part of the indictment that Cenk is referring to. But let's get into the founders of Tenet Media, which was at the center of this whole influence scheme, influence peddling. Now, according to the indictment, Lauren Chen and her husband, Liam Donovan, referred to as Founder 1 and Founder 2 in the document, worked together to mask US Company One's, that's Tenet's, true source of funding, including from the company's own talent, which includes Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, and Dave Rubin. Now, altogether, Tenet Media took in nearly $10 million from the Russians to carry out this influence campaign in the United States. And if you're wondering, okay, how was the money divvied up? About $8 million went toward the content creators. And when it comes to Lauren Chen and her husband, they took about $700,000, nearly $1 million of that money for themselves. But the real money makers here were the content creators who, according to the indictment, were unwittingly spreading Russian propaganda. Okay, so let's take a look at the portions of the indictment that I think are interesting here. So the indictment says, describing US Company One's investor to Commentator 1 and Commentator 2, the commentators, of course, are the content creators, as Edward Gregorian, a purported finance professional in Western Europe. Founder 1 and Founder 2, that's Lauren Chen and her husband, admitted to each other in their private communications that their investors were, in truth and in fact, the Russians. The same term that Founder 1 and Founder 2 previously used to refer to RT while working directly under contract with RT as described above. Lauren Chen had been working with RT beginning in 2021. That's just a bit of information to know about. On or about May 27th, 2023, Founder 1 messaged Founder 2 on Discord, quote, I'm going to ask the Russians about hiring Producer 2 this coming week. Approximately 2 days later, Founder 1 messaged Producer 2 on Discord. Here's a list of responsibilities I sent over to the investors to approve bringing you on, waiting to hear back on timelines, salary. On or about August 8th of 2023, Persona 1 informed Founder 1 and Founder 2 in Discord that the request to hire a producer/booker was approved. So I give you that portion of the indictment to show you that they would just kind of refer to the source of the funding as our investor. And Cenk, to your point, I totally agree that it's like hard to believe that any content creator, certainly a content creator like Tim Pool or Dave Rubin, who know what it's like to make money off something like YouTube. Like, it's hard to believe that they would just buy that there's like a benevolent investor who's not trying to influence peddle in the United States. But you also have to remember that on the right wing, there's all sorts of billionaires who just give money to media outlets to regurgitate the message that they want them to regurgitate. That is not illegal as long as it's an American businessman doing it. What was illegal in this case was that there was a very clear scheme by the Russians to spread propaganda here in the United States, and their front was a US-based media company that they were funding.
And Ana Kasparian is right here, and that's what, to me, makes this story even worse, is there's a lot of money on the right funding all this stuff, even if it's not profitable. They just want to get their message out there. Famously, Fox News, Rupert Murdoch, I believe, lost $500 million a year or something crazy like that for the first 10 years that Fox News was on the air. There's not really that kind of money on the left. So to me, this makes this even worse for Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, and Dave Rubin, who don't seem to be the sharpest knives in the drawer to begin with. I mean, the Majority Report, Sam Cedar makes fun of Dave Rubin all the time, talking about how stupid they think he is. But when there is other money out there that you can get from billionaires in the United States, and all these guys are doing really well. So I don't know that they necessarily needed this money to keep going. So it just seems highly unlikely that they wouldn't have looked into this some, unless Tim Pool and Benny Johnson and Dave Rubin, these guys are just epically stupid, which they may be. But the thought that they just had no idea seems unlikely.
By the way, I should also note that RT had previously been sanctioned by the federal government. And so RT knew that they couldn't just influence peddle under their own name. So this was kind of a roundabout way of doing it.
Yeah, so look, this story is super frustrating because I want to have cross-partisan conversations, but we have to point out things that are obvious. So look, to Anna's point, there's in the right-wing media ecosystem, there's so much money, and people get paid by fracking company founders and heirs to the fortunes of different banks and railroad companies and oil companies left over, et cetera, right? There's just so much. Matt Sheffield, who used to work here, used to be on the right. He actually helped found Newsbusters, a big right-wing media site, et cetera. Then he came over to the left, and he often talks about this, and he did while he was here. He says the biggest difference between the right and the left is in the right wing, there's so much money, there's money everywhere, because they're paying for propaganda, whether it's for fracking, it's for Russia, it's for drill baby drill, whatever it's for, it's filled to the rim with propaganda. On the left, there's none of that. So he comes over, he's like, where's the money? There's no money, right? So here we actually, on the left, we actually have to earn our money. And so and digital media is so hard. All these companies have gone under, Mashable, Mike, Attention, all of like dozens of companies have gone bankrupt because it's so hard to make a living. Then you see a guy like Dave Rubin, works here, we all have, modest income, et cetera, right? Gets a nice paying job at Riot Media that has nothing to do with politics. I go, great, fantastic, good luck, Dave, appreciate it, et cetera. We're on great terms. All of a sudden, he takes this massive turn to the right while pretending to be a classical liberal or whatever the hell he was saying, right? And then it starts attacking us wildly, and all of a sudden, a giant mansion pops out. And then you look at his views and you're like, those are microscopic. How is he getting this much money? Because when you go to the right wing, it's like shopping for which funder you would like. Whose propaganda would you like me to do? Which is ironically very similar to mainstream media. And let's note that too here. So it's not a defense of these guys. It's two things can be true at the same time. Mainstream media is tutting. Well, okay, you guys take $17 billion from politicians every election cycle these days. That's at least the last one. And then you guys tell us that the politicians are honest and that we should never talk about money in politics because all the money in politics comes to you. So US politicians buy you instead of Russian politicians. So look, I'm just giving you all the context here, but that's why that right-wing media ecosystem being filled with so like millions and millions of dollars in propaganda money is an odd but true defense of these guys. They might have thought like, I don't know, these guys give us money all the time to say stuff. Oh, these guys happen to be Russian. I mean, they probably would have taken it if they were Libyan. I don't know.
And Cenk Uygur's right with what he's saying. And, obviously he knows the details of what happened with Dave Rubin going over to the right. And there's just not the kind of money on the left to do videos about Medicare for all or increasing Social Security or something like that. So these guys, the Majority Report has talked about this a lot. Sam Cedar and Emma Vigeland and the other people on the Majority Report have said, if they could sell out on what their beliefs are and go over to the right, they could make way more money, but they don't want to do that because they want to follow what they believe are the principles of, they want to stick to the left because that's what they say that they believe in. So you have to really wonder if these guys like Tim Pool and Dave Rubin and Benny Johnson are just actors who don't really believe this stuff, but they're just saying what makes the most money for them. And like Cenk Uygur says, maybe they didn't look that closely because there's just so much money being thrown around, and they are, if they really believe this stuff, are inclined to already be on the side of the Russians anyway. So maybe these Russian investors just went and said, well, they're already anti-Ukraine and pro-Russian because of Trump and all of this, and we'll just find some of them and fund them. And like Ana Kasparian and Cenk Uygur are saying here, it remains to be seen whether these guys actually knew exactly what was going on. It's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out. But what do you think? Do you think that Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, Benny Johnson, these others were just completely duped and had no idea? Were they willfully ignorant, or do you think they knew where the money was coming from all along and they were more than willing to go along with this propaganda? Who knows? I'm sure that Ana Kasparian and Cenk Uygur will follow this more in the future. Make sure to give me a comment as to what you think about all of this. Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. The channel's really growing quickly. I want it to continue to go. I want it to continue to grow, and your likes and subscribes help me to do that. This is Chris on Culture. I'll see you in the next video.